Good evening, everyone. I hope I find you well. Here I have a little selection of Allosauruses. This, of course, is the legendary Papo original Allosaurus. This is the figure I have to thank for getting me back into collecting dinosaur figures and also for reinvigorating my lifelong interest in prehistory, because when I first saw this figure, I was blown away by it. I didn't know dinosaur figures could look like this. But I'm not here to talk about this one tonight, because I have a new addition to the flock, which is this wonderful representation of Allosaurus europaeus from new Spanish company Mesozoo. I strongly recommend that you check them out on Instagram. I'll put a link to their Instagram page in the description below. This is their first entry and it's a very strong one indeed. Allosaurus is my favourite genus of theropod dinosaur, as you may well all know, and I'm incredibly choosy about the figures I get of it because I feel it tends to be a bit hard done by. A lot of figures look a little bit derpy or they don't quite get that predatory look quite right. So when I first saw pictures of this figure, I knew that it had all the qualities that I want in an Allosaurus figure, and now I've got it in hand, it actually looks much better in hand than it does on any pictures, and I'm very, very impressed with it. So first off, I'll get a couple of the little bad points out of the way. So you might have noticed it hasn't got lips, the jaws don't fully close up together there. It's got a bit of an overbite, the neck's perhaps a little bit short, the forearms are perhaps a little bit slim. But overall, these are just nitpicks. So many museum figures still suffer from problems like this. I'm not going to bother to worry about things like that with the dinosaur toy. It's really, really well done otherwise. So starting off at the head, as you can see, it's got large eye. Allosaurus did have very large eye sockets. There's no shrink wrapping on the skull, but what you do have is the antorbital fenestra picked out by a little row of tubercles here. Just kind of throw your eyes off a little, but it's not shrink wrapping. It is just an artistic ornamentation that they've put in there. It's nice the way the cheeks flare out a little here over the jaws. The articulated jaw is done nicely. As you can see, there's a little bit of sloppiness around the paint, but these teeth are brilliant. All assorted sizes, nicely sculpted, all individually sculpted too. The articulated jaw does work very, very well. It's got this solid red colour on the inside of the mouth, which is very effective, matches the eyes. One thing I really liked about this figure was the fact that they have extended the crests with keratin, because a lot of figures, they just kind of follow the contours of the skull, of the skeleton. They don't bother to exaggerate these features at all, and the chances are they would have been considerably larger in real life than they would have been as the skeleton suggests. Another thing that really impressed me about this figure is the fact there's no shrink wrapping at the back of the skull. Again, there's a little seam line here. Ignore that, because it is just a seam line. It throws your eye off a bit. There is actually no shrink wrapping here at all. As you can see, the back of the skull is fully encapsulated in flesh, as it should be. And again, a lot of dinosaur figures still get that wrong. This would all have been muscle. And Mesozoo have come along and got that right straight off. So that's a great testament to their sculptor and how he understands dinosaurs. Also quite like this choice of them putting little spines and spikes down the back. As we know from evidence on other theropod dinosaurs, they did like to bite each other in the back of the head and the neck. So having a little bit of armour around here would have helped to defend them against that. So that's a nice artistic choice, which I'm quite happy with here. Looking at it from the front, as you can see, it's very narrow, which is perfect for Allosaurus, and also that the eyes are perfectly positioned on the side of the head. Really, really nicely done. Some nice ripples in the skin. The skin texture, of course, in a figure of this scale, you wouldn't be able to see the scales. This is not something that bothers me, because as far as I'm concerned, a figure of a dinosaur is representative of what the dinosaur was as a whole. So it's nice to see incidental details like this Komodo dragon type skin. And knowing that dinosaurs probably did behave quite a bit like Komodo dragons now, this is a good choice. And there's no evidence to say Allosaurus had, there's no evidence to say it didn't have either, so I'm perfectly happy with this again. And also the way it's been sculpted, there's no shrink wrapping at all. You've got great bulk to the torso and the hips and the neck here. And the way these scales flow across that body gives you the impression of a really, really tough hide. It's really well done. Some nice ripples in the throat here, and as you can see, the scales in the skin are softer looking on the underside, which is a nice touch. A couple of incidental rows of slightly larger tubercles across the tops of the shoulders and also across the tops of the hips, which is a nice touch. And also you can see that these scales are all slightly different sizes. They do sort of fit together like a pavement. Very, very reminiscent of a Komodo dragon. Really, really well done. Again, looking from the front, got some nice ripples in the flesh under the chest here. And as you can see, the hands are unsnated, perfect as they should be. And these hands, beautifully proportioned hands with this great big thumb claw, beautifully represented here. On my model, there's been a little bit of run over of the black paint on the neighbouring claws, which makes them appear a little more exaggerated than they actually are. Don't let that throw you off. The proportions of the actual sculpt are excellent. Very, very impressed with that. Again, coming to the legs, you see they're beautifully bird-like. The shape of them, they've got this perfect drumstick type shape, which I know that dinosaurs had. So the collector, the man who sculpts these, really does understand animals and understand what he's doing. Really obviously does appreciate dinosaurs, because this is brilliant. There's no exaggerated musculature here at all. It just looks absolutely fantastic. The width of the ankle and everything, perfect, absolutely great. Really impressed with this. The feet are nicely proportioned, maybe it's a tiny little bit large, but the figure stands perfectly on these feet and it's not going anywhere. And I think this figure is probably quite tough as well, because on the odd occasion I have accidentally knocked it over. It hasn't yet scuffed, so it's obviously built to last. It is quite a good hefty figure overall. The feet are beautifully sculpted. As you can see, the toes are nicely splayed out, bearing the weight of the animal. And if I turn it over on the underside, you can see that the pads of the feet are splayed out, bearing the weight of the animal too. There is no legal information stamped on the figure anywhere at all, because this Allosaurus comes with a little tag around its neck with the information you need on there. So that's nice as well. So if you take photographs or anything, you won't have a big CE mark or anything on this figure showing up in your pictures. There's a couple of little seam lines, but they're not really vastly visible, especially with the sort of Komodo dragon type coloration I've gone for as well. Really well done. One thing I was really impressed with this figure was the length, the proportion of the tail, and also the thickness of it. And again, this is getting back to the sculptor's talent here, because reptiles do have very thick tails. Obviously, we know that dinosaurs have this great big thick chorda femoralis going down the tail to help propel the thigh muscles. And also there'll be fat deposits around here as well, so that's been fantastically well done. The pubic boot should maybe be encapsulated a little bit more in flesh, but that again is a bit of a nitpick. And also you can see there is a cloacal vent positioned correctly under here as well. So I'll turn the figure around. The overall pose, it's just a sort of languid walking type pose. The way the feet are flexed, you can see that there's more weight borne on the back foot, as though the foot on the left hand side is just coming down. So that's a nice pose. Slight turn of the head, slight movement of the tail, nothing exaggerated. And I love poses like this on dinosaurs. There's nothing boring about them at all. They look really realistic. You can see there's a tiny little bit of red overspill on the paintwork on here, but again, nothing to worry about. So thank you very much, Mesozoo. You have now produced what has become, for me, my favourite Allosaurus figure. And I've got a feeling that if you've started this strong, you're only going to get better. And I know that you have mentioned that you may indeed have a Tyrannosaurus Rex, a Carnotaurus and a Prestosuchus in development too. And we're also aware that there is a Spinosaurus coming from this company, and I greatly look forward to seeing what they produce in future. So I hope you've enjoyed having a look at this figure with me, and I shall see you in the next video.